We will now start the opening panel. The title for the opening panel is CSA the Battle That Can Never Be Won? This panel will be moderated by Mr. Rahul Bose. The panelists will be, the first panelist is Pooja Taparia. Pooja is the founder and CEO of Arpan, which is an NGO that is based in Mumbai with a mission to prevent the occurrence of CSA and also heal those who have been affected by it. Started in 2006, Arpan has grown from a 3-people team to a 90-people team. It is one of the biggest organizations that work on CSA in India. Among all the activities that they run, some of them are teaching, training and counselling services to deal with CSA. Arpan has so far helped over 160,000 children and adults directly through its services and over 7 lakh individuals indirectly through trainings and capacity building. They have got multiple awards for their exemplary work and high organizational standards, including the Dasra Girl Power Award and recently the C. Henry Kempe Award by ISPCAN. Pooja herself has been awarded the Architects of the Future Award 2013-14. Our second panelist is Ms. Sonvi Khanna. Sonvi works as a team lead in Dasra's advisory research and due diligence vertical. She works with the team to plan and execute knowledge creation on development issues across Dasra's priority areas, which are governance, water, and sanitation for adolescent girls. Prior to Dasra, Sonvi worked in a research capacity with the International Center for Research on Women in India and the Ashoka Foundation in the US. She holds a master's degree in international relations from University of Warwick. Our third panelist is Mr. Nishit Kumar. Nishit has been working for over 40 years, last 15 of which have been in the development sector. He is known for his 11-year tenure within the senior team management in the Childline India Foundation. Along with his team, he took Childline from a 20-city, 1 million calls a year to a nationwide 500 cities, 15 million calls a year operation. He brought IT and telecom technology. He also initiated CSA awareness programs with a unique model that has since covered over 5,000 schools in Mumbai and Bangalore. He also drafted a bill for CSA and advocated with the government. Komal, a film that I think everybody in this auditorium must have seen, is also a national award-winning film on CSA, which was his idea. He is now setting up a large social enterprise, a Section 8 public limited company that focuses on social and behavioral change communications, which is going to be a first in India. Our fourth panelist, Mr. Rishi Verma. Rishi is a writer and a hopeful, as he would like to call it, filmmaker. He is also a survivor of child abuse. 3 years ago, he began to work on a series of documentaries about other survivors in the hope to make more stories, more voices be heard, and keep the conversation around CSA alive. The documentary that he made is called Invisibles, and I won't be surprised if almost all of you have seen it. With that, I now invite the panel to come on the stage.
Dr. Lois Engelbrecht has been one of the key people who've advised us on our programs. We now have Dr. David Finkelhor on our advisory board, and a lot of people from the corporate sector who've come together to tell us how we could be growing, how can we bring in management principles in the organization to grow as a team. What's also helped is to have a clear vision and a mission. Articulating over a period of time by working on the field as to what are we about, what do we want to focus on, and continuing to articulate it for us, our entire team, our board members, our donors, and our partners who've opened doors for us to go and implement the programs that we're running. And I think that's really, really key. what's also important is to finally develop a model that works and is effective. Investors, funders are looking for models that you're able to demonstrate that has an impact, and to be able to communicate that. We could all be doing wonderful work, but to communicate it and present it in a language that the investors understand is very, very critical. And I really feel that communication is very, very important in that. Monitoring and evaluation. And I think that's also very important, to evaluate our work, to be able to see how effective are we in our work, to feed into our own strategies as we grow and go further on the path of the issue of child sexual abuse, and to be able to communicate that to the funders. I feel a lot of people are always looking for data and outcomes, and that are we really thinking about what we're wanting to do. I do believe that funders are not looking at the issue per se, or feeling passionate about the issue. In my experience of Arpan, I have found funders are looking for models of scale, models of impact, and are happy to support it. So I think these are some key things that I think have helped.
I think it's very revealing that your last point, that funders aren't really interested in the cause, they're interested in and there's so much of truth in that. They're interested in impact and results.
Absolutely, because I have made so many presentations, people don't have child sexual abuse on their agenda. Nobody's thinking about it. And when you go and show that, this is an issue, it has this impact, that's helped them sort of relate to that issue, because all of them are also parents. But finally, they really want to see whether you can go deliver.
Sonvi, I don't know if I'm right in saying this, but you guys don't fund CSA at Dasra. Why?
So Dasra does not fund issues per se. We're a sector agnostic organization. But we have worked on issues that relate to child protection, such as child marriage, etc. But it's all driven by the ecosystems that we've chosen to kind of develop. And so like the adolescent girl ecosystem, which is the Dasra Girl Alliance that has been...
But that would be into child sexual abuse, that would definitely be part of it?
With child sexual abuse?
Adolescent girls?
Yes,
embracing
child
that
sexual
ecosystem?
abuse is not something that Dasra has worked on so far.
Yeah, but why? If it's adolescent girls...
So I think one of the things, Dasra typically likes to work in sectors, or thinks of working in sectors where we are able to then create an ecosystem out of it, get different stakeholders to work together on an issue, kind of carve out if there is a strategy that all these stakeholders can possibly come together and work towards, and how different stakeholders can add to that strategy and work towards that strategy. So fortunately or unfortunately, child sexual abuse is not one of those ecosystems right now that we have so far worked on.
No, I'm trying to understand why, because everything you've said could easily apply to CSA, right?
I mean, absolutely. So
all your methodologies and your parameters you put out could easily translate into funding CSA. Have we not come to you? Has the sector not come to you? Or have you received stuff which is not quite conforming to the kind of methodology you're...
So typically when we invest in an ecosystem, it's an area where there's a lot of knowledge already existing, a lot of research that is already existing, which we can then evaluate and say, here is a sector where there are some 50 to 100 organizations already working, but not really being able to reach out effectively enough. That's when we do our research, try to identify gaps in the sector where more investment is needed, and which are the organizations that are at the tipping point. What would be really interesting actually is, it's not about the numbers, it's about what we are trying to do as a sector. Is this even a sector? Is it even an ecosystem, or is it still an issue? From the perspective of a funder, something that is very visible, a big body of work that has research behind it and after it actually is what starts to gather credibility. And I think in the eyes, at least in Dasra's experience of working with funders, credibility becomes a huge thing. So when you said that there's only 50% of 12,500 children who've been abused sexually, I would actually say, let's ditch a research approach and actually add up the numbers that these 31 organizations are reaching out to, and see what that number looks like, I think that number is going to be far more than 50% to 12,500 students. Am I not?
No, that's incorrect, because we'll be looking only at survivors. So it'll be 100%. We are not looking at a pool of people of whom the survivors, so that's a very different, the research is necessary only because you know what the percentages are on a contemporary basis as opposed to something in 2007.
Absolutely, but in order to be able to reach out to funders and make a case with them, I think it's important to, like Pooja said, not only educate them with a shocking number, but also be able to tell them here is how you can intervene. Because a lot of the numbers and a lot of the problems that are behavioral in India are hard for people to grasp because they don't know how they can make a difference.
Many years ago, when we had a case in the Bombay Sessions Court, which became famous as the Anchorage case, we won at the Sessions Court and we lost at the High Court. I was the unfortunate representative who took the decision of the judge in the judge's chamber. And he just looked up from his papers and told me, 375 doesn't apply, 377 doesn't apply, there is no law, I recommend you go to Parliament. The evidence has not been refuted, however, I have to acquit them on technical grounds. After that, we put in enormous research, asking exactly the same questions that you were asking. Why aren't people doing this? The 2007 study shows such a huge number. It's a study which had all kinds of views. People who said the numbers of research was too small, people who said that the research methodology had issues in it. But there were also people who turned around and said, look at the big picture that's emerging. Okay, if it's not 50%, 40%, is that acceptable to you? I mean, so this is what we looked at all that, and we did a lot of study into what it does. My own personal feeling at that point of time was that it's an issue, and to create a cause equity out of child sexual abuse, we probably need to upgrade its priority in the child protection sector. When I was at Childline, we actually attempted to, I just saw Kajol walk in, and she was my boss, for many of those years. When we actually started, we took child protection, as a concept and said we push the concept of child protection across all sectors and raise the equity of cost of child protection as a cause. And make child sexual abuse a part of that. So until it comes to the top of mind of people saying this is a prominent issue. What is cause equity? If you ask any person, lay person, what are the 3 most important causes you would donate to if you had 1,000 rupees? So what are the 3 causes? The top 3 causes change every 10 years. Post Nirbhaya, the cause was sexual violence against women. So it changes because of various issues. So you have to do things that actually brings it to the top of mind. When individual ordinary donors who want to donate 1,000 rupees think about it, then all the funders want to be in that space, because then they get the maximum value. Now I just want to add to what Pooja said, that in the issue of, when you pitch to funders for child sexual abuse, prevention programs, the issue that is often faced is that this is not an intervention impact outcome. Because what impact outcome are you going to show from preventive education? Are we going to go and track the life of the child and say, okay, have you ever been sexually abused? You can't do that. So what impact? So funders will say, look, if you're doing intervention and this is a part of that component, then we can look at that. But when you're doing intervention, it's already lost. The battle is already lost. So you have to do prevention. In the case of HIV, prevention became so big because the cost of treating was death. So funders came in over there, and governments came in over there with funding. Child sexual abuse, the cost of not preventing it is actually almost a lifelong treatment for the child, for the victim. It impacts the victim almost throughout the life of the victim. All kinds of issues. So therefore it needs to be brought up.
The invisibles, I think what you alluded to quite beautifully is the fact that, number one, you can clearly see what lack of education is doing to children across the world. you can't see what child sexual abuse is. I think it's just a large-scale conspiracy, don't worry, whichever mic I have. And that, in effect, now becomes another vicious circle, because since you don't see it, you don't do anything about it, you don't do anything about it, it doesn't get enough attention, and it's reduced to the invisibles. Your first thoughts on this, Rishi?
When it comes down to something as big as CSA, as important as CSA, we can't really afford to forget things. We can't forget numbers, we can't forget what it does to people. Like you said, what it does to the child's entire life. And that is why it's important that more and more people know about it. Because my personal belief is it's not important that we get from 31 organizations to 31,000. It's what we're able to do with just those 31. If I can get, or if we can get, the resources that would be made available to 400,000 organizations to just these 30, then I think we're okay. It's how we're approaching it rather than just growing the number of organizations, because sometimes what will also happen is the more organizations dealing with an issue, the more confusion and chaos there will be. Even though we'd like to believe we're all on the same page and working together, but sometimes in life it may or may not work like that. So it's just the idea of we have 31 organizations here now. How can we all work together on this? How can the researcher help the counselor, who can help the filmmaker, who can help the person who's organizing everything, putting everything together? For me, it's about that.
I think Nishit put out quite beautifully that idea of prevention being made the most important reason for funding will only gain primacy if we know that if we don't prevent this, this is what's going to happen. So Pooja, what is that this is what's going to happen that in your personal experience you've seen, which we can actually decide to make a national conversation?
We can measure effectiveness of prevention. Arpan's been doing it for a number of years, not only to look at short-term and immediate outcomes, but to even look at long-term outcomes. We've been able to bring in an external agency to audit the personal safety education program, a model of both prevention and intervention that we've developed, and we found fantastic success. And when I go quote two funders and say that we surveyed 770 children, the survey done by Indian Market Research Bureau, they found after Arpan's program, 8% children had faced an unsafe situation, and of those 8% children, 90% children were able to seek immediate help from an adult. Bang, it works. A, it's in the language that they understand. B, we're able to actually measure effectiveness that has even guided Arpan's own strategies of going ahead and making our prevention work robust. But it absolutely demonstrates impact which people want to see. We've had Goldman Sachs double their investment in Arpan in just less than 2 years. A lot more corporations are coming ahead to support Arpan, and they're able to really see that we're able to demonstrate it. Everybody knows and finally understands that child sexual abuse can create severe trauma. It can impact people's lives, and we need to educate them about it. But finally, it's about showing how can we create outcomes in the short term and the long term for children.
So Sujispita, Janvi and Nikita, I think she should be conducting one entire session where she just tells us all the wonderful ways to communicate to potential funders. So what should we do in the future as a sector for you guys to turn around and say, yes, you've made it from an issue, you've made it into a sector?
You don't have to do it alone. I mean, if you come to us, we will help you do it as well. But so it's not you and us, but I think I would take what Pooja said and actually ask the sector, what is it that we want to achieve as a sector 20 years from now, 10 years from now, 5 years from now? And that can't be one organization. Even if Arpan is the biggest organization, I don't think Pooja would want to say, I'm telling you for the sector that this is what we should be achieving. It has to be a collective decision, a collective vision. And I think that's where we start backtracking, which is what I was saying is the whole approach of building an ecosystem. Where you say that if this is the vision, this is what we need to do. Here are the different stakeholders, here's what they bring to the table, and here are the gaps. And I'm sure you'll see that there are gaps in funding, and that's when you're going to go to the funder and say, not for my organization, but for this sector, we need to be able to raise X thousand crores. I don't know what that figure is. Maybe you can help me with that. And when you said that, and you said, this is the size of the population that we are trying to target. This is what all we are doing. Here is how you can engage with your funds. Here is how you can engage with your time and expertise. I think at least in our experience, whether it was domestic violence, whether it was anti-sex trafficking, whether it was child marriage, in all these issues which were disturbing, grim, whenever this approach was kind of undertaken with the donor, it sort of worked. Because I think it's important for us to understand the donor space a little bit as well. It's no longer just foreign international agencies. In fact, if you saw the figures, the share of the international agencies is really reducing in the development sector in India. Your biggest and fastest growing, if not biggest, at least the fastest growing donor type is actually the individual philanthropist. That's where we've seen almost a 6-time growth in the last 6 years. Not the government, not international agencies, not CSR. How are we targeting these individuals? The emotional appeal does work for them. And like Pooja is saying, if you're able to attach that emotional appeal with what is it that we are trying to achieve and how is your money really going to add up to that? If you take them on a journey of learning and experiencing, it works hugely. And you don't want to get people who, you will have to go year on year and ask for money and have to build a case from scratch again. You want people to buy into the sector and be sustained funders of the sector for a long time. So how do you think of that? I think what we need to do is think beyond our program, our organization, our outreach, and start thinking collectively about the sector and its needs and getting everybody on board. When it's visible in a big mass, it's easier to create the case.
That's really a wonderful way to move ahead. Rishi, tell us a little bit about your film and tell us a little bit about, we know that you're a survivor, and tell us a little bit about the film and what compelled you to make it and what's been the reaction to it.
What will my parents say when they watch this? A lot of people did that. So we started and we originally interviewed about 76 people, out of which, if you watch the film, there's now 7 in it. And I completely understand that. But that's entirely the film. And the reason I had for making the film was just, I was having a conversation with a friend about this issue. And the next day it was just, we need to have this dialogue going on. Because like the Nirbhaya case, for instance, while we're still talking about it in bits and pieces, what really happens is the conversation dies out eventually. So the idea was to just show this film to a lot of people who may or may not know about it. It's easy for us sitting in this auditorium to say everybody knows about this issue, but that is not true at all. I showed the film for the first time in Bandra in Bombay. Yes, we're at a sort of midway stage where we can't decide if what is needed is awareness or actual action about prevention or what we do after, but yes, that was it. That was really the idea of.
We don't have numbers for what is the economic burden of child sexual abuse on India, but we do have numbers around the economic burden of child sexual abuse, not even specifically child sexual abuse, but child abuse for Asia, America. I do use that. I'm not sure whether if we figured out what is the economic burden, how much of a difference it would make. It might, actually. However, it's just a humongous task. Communication is key, and the second point that you did make about that people know what is the impact of trauma, what I really meant was people who are working in this space know the impact of child sexual abuse. The idea with communication really is to educate people, and that's what we need to do across the board, whether it's just people in the civil society, whether it's all the stakeholders related to the issue, whether it's philanthropists, corporates, donors. We just need to educate them about the issue, and that will make a difference.
I think I would add that, I would take a point from Nishit's whole point about storytelling and add to that, right? I don't think it's either the numbers or the story alone that can win the battle of getting somebody's attention. First of all, think about it, right? There's denial. It's uncomfortable as a society for us to accept that we treat our children as sexual commodities in households. You know, when you say call it an acronym, it loses its edges. CSA doesn't sound as bad as child sexual abuse does. So I think it's about combining the numbers with a passionate story around it that really gets people's attention. And like I think I also mentioned before, once they've been angered enough or they've been inspired enough, telling them, kind of leveraging that energy and telling them, here is how you can intervene. Just a simple question out there, right? How do I intervene if I'm not either the complainer or the aggrieving party in a case of child sexual abuse? Do I intervene through trainings? It's not as satisfying as going and painting a school, as developing a curriculum that I can see is going to go to all schools in the country. It is a very one-to-one sort of an issue. And so how do I, sitting 500 miles from where this work is really happening, have an impact on that child? I think connecting the dots is something that a lot of sectors in India, especially the ones working on the most difficult and grim issues, are not doing very well. So it's not just about the size of the sample, it's about what was the so what of saying that to them? What did you mean to do by calling that number out to them? I think thinking that through is kind of important.
I'm Nancy from Tulir. On the research, I would like to comment on the research. So worldwide, child sexual abuse is underreported. So for me, the important question is, yes, research is important, but I think research, again, to show that the prevalence rate, so much research with children to show prevalence is not necessary, but I think research about what is the adults' awareness levels on child sexual abuse. What are adults doing enough on child sexual abuse to protect children? So, for example, our educational institutions, do they even have a child protection policy? Okay, so we need to examine the different stakeholders' understanding on what is their understanding of child sexual abuse, what is their level of capacity that they have to protect children, so that are they doing enough to protect children? So I don't think, again, we need to prove that this many number of children are being sexually abused, because worldwide child sexual abuse is underreported. The number is not going to increase, but we know enough. Every day we hear stories, we see stories of children. Every second person that we talk to, after a point, tell us that they have gone through sexual abuse. So even this question of the funders even asking, oh, is that an issue, shows their lack of awareness about child sexual abuse. So we don't have to do yet another research with children to show the funders, oh, see, this many number of children are being abused, so please fund this issue.
I'm Eradicate. I'm working as a counselor in the College of Social Work, Nirmala Niketan. I think some of our students recently got placed in Arpan. I have a question regarding preventive measures. I think that because most of the preventive measures are focused on the possible victims, that is the children, are we or should we also be focusing on the possible perpetrators? Wherein we can focus on a group of people where we can also talk about the repercussions.
The way Arpan's been working with children who've been showing inappropriate behaviors is through the school-based program. So we address disclosures that happen within the school as well, where older children could be demonstrating inappropriate sexual behavior, and absolutely addressing it with counseling and intervention. And it's really great if you're looking at doing something in that space. It's unaddressed as much as it needs to be, and we all need to work on that as well.
About public health and about, while it is true that child sexual abuse victims tend to have a lifelong issue, and they have, Rahi in Delhi treats adult survivors, and all the stories are about 25 years and 30 years of psychological issues, whether it is OCD or whether it's introvertism or extrovertism or whatever it is that it takes the form of. The cost to public health, which is what the government looks at, is marginal from this. And whereas the cost to public health from HIV related issues is staggering for the government, which is why the government actually looks at that. But that said, this is also an issue in cities like Bombay. If you find, we had to, when I was in Childline, to find psychologists to treat children, child victims, was an almost impossibility in Bombay. So, so the numbers of even professionals who are dealing with victims is very, very small. You know, it's not just about ignorance. It is about actually, putting your head into the sand and saying, I don't want to know.
Yeah, okay.
Look, parents have issues in defining words, proper words, for the private parts of the child's body. Parents are in denial. When we started the school program 5 years ago, we did a informal study across many people. We asked them just 3 questions. What words would you use in your language to describe what parts of the body of your child is private? What words would you use to say to your child that who can see or touch these private parts? The answers were revealing. We don't need this information. Only slum children need this information. My wife will do it. My husband will do it. Why is this information necessary? The school will do it. So I mean, it is very revealing. So the issue is clouded in a whole lot of aspects. It is not just ignorance. We've engaged the media in many ways. I mean, the Anchorage case trials that brought out, we extensively engaged with media. We were part of the Amir Khan Satyamay Jayate, program. So that raised awareness. When the law came around, we did lots of press engagement. So lots of those things are happening. The good thing is, today every paper reports some case. The unfortunate thing is that reportage is still a very, very small number.
I think there's, just to add one small point, right? I think we also have to think about media slightly differently. Are we creating information to create more bystanders? Or are we creating information to mobilize action? I think there is an overload of information in some things, in some forums. You don't want to know so much, but you're forced to see it all. And in other areas, there is less. And we have to know that unless you spin it in a way that it's not just information overload, but something that shows you a light at the end of the tunnel, this is redundant noise. It's not going to get anywhere. So I think thinking about media, and I don't know, there are other media people in the room, but thinking about media as a responsible forum to mobilize action and not just create noise and point fingers, I think is something that has to be thought through as well in this space.
Hi, my name is Uma and I represent the RM initiative. I looked at the question, is CSA the battle that can ever be won? Can never be won, actually. And when I looked at it, I was like, oh, okay. And then listening to all of us, I just feel that, firstly, I think as a sector, we need to mature. We have been focusing on certain aspects of CSA, while certain aspects have completely been left out. And we're not talking about rehabilitation, we're not talking about the judicial process, and I think there is a lot of work that needs to happen, and a lot of also thought needs to be put in other aspects of CSA, which moves beyond prevention and also moves beyond primary school children. I feel the young adults and the adolescents have to be really sort of addressed.
Richard, anything you want to jump in with? Any kind of thoughts?
Yeah, I thought I was actually quite educated as an individual until I got into this here in India. I wasn't doing this beforehand. And speaking to Professor Bayer about pedophilia, I thought, pedophile is someone who you should castrate and put into jail and throw the keys off far away. And then being educated, they observed what he was looking at, what he was doing, and they got concerned. I think this is a very good example of where a parent sees inappropriate behavior, takes the appropriate action, reached out to Professor Bayer. He's now worked with this child. This child has got clear pedophilic tendencies, and he's never acted on any of those. Now he has a child that's being treated, who was a potential perpetrator. You're helping him. He's going to be able to live, hopefully, some kind of normal life, and there are no victims. Now, for me, that is just one case, and there can be many, many more of parents being more open and being more honest with themselves as well, and saying, maybe I should do something about it. Maybe I should raise it. And it's just something we as I also have children. We as parents have an obligation as well to deal with it.
I'm Riddhi. I'm from School of Life. We're an organization in Gurgaon working in this space. creating awareness. And therefore I feel, yes, we are trying to create that noise, that communication link between parents and children, trying to get them to speak about it, trying to have children come up to their parents and talk about it. But, and then, someone said from the panel, and then hopefully parents will report or children will report. But I think if you're looking at the question, is this CSA battle ever going to be won? Then the thing is that, we don't have ethical, strong, robust, easily functioning systems to help once when the reporting is also done. And that's an area which, perplexes us. We have parents who come to us, this child was abused in the school, he's come and spoke to me, I feel wonderful, what do I do next? They go to the school tries to hush the matter. They go to the police tries to throw the matter out. The school defines, firing the perpetrator. Of course, we don't have any registry system. That itself is debatable. So that guy probably goes out and, gets hired in some other school. So even if parents come and report, even if the child reports, and I would love to know those 8% who reported, Pooja, what really happened, why we're able to probably put a stop to it. But are we really winning the battle? We need to have more robust systems. So that's also an important aspect we need to look at.
Okay, Sonvi has a correct question. That will be the last one online. We can take this discussion outside. Please go ahead. Please feel free. We have 2 days to do this stuff.
Yeah, just very quickly, I think we haven't spoken about, and Pooja, perhaps my question would be perhaps to you, is how we are leveraging the government, because the government does have the integrated child protection scheme, and I'm assuming that the entire system, it's 550 crores in 2016-17 that was given to this. How are we leveraging whatever systems, whatever child protection officers that have been instituted under this scheme down to the district level to relieve some of the burden of workforce? Because if it's a 1:1 people-intensive area, I think the workforce, or at least the reporting agencies, can be these people. So how are we really leveraging the government?
It's been like an elephant, and we're trying to prod the elephant. And at this point, I'm not able to really say whether we've been able to even push a little. Some of our experiences have been, and I would not like this to be quoted or even recorded or shared in a social media or any public forum. But if some people already know, there was a district child protection unit in Maharashtra. We started training them, and we did months of training, and then the government decides to dishevel the DCPU unit, and it gets disheveled. It becomes a part of the Women and Child Ministry, and then now we've started retraining all the people of the Konkan zone of Maharashtra under that. The other day we heard another news about it, and I'm not going to quote that. But it's just so difficult even to get them to look at it more strategically. I think what Arpan is now going to be trying to do is that how do we get the government to mainstream child protection, not just looking at child protection separately, but every ministry looking at it, whether it's health, whether it's the tribal affairs ministry. We're now being pushed to get into that, because there's so much of sexual abuse happening in the ashram shalas, whether it's the education department, it's the women and child ministry. I think it'll have to be across intersection, across this, and that's not true just for the government, but all these 400,000 education organizations that are working. And that's been our attempt, is that how do we make it a part of everybody's agenda, whether you work on whatever issue, because I don't think we need to look at child protection separately. We need to bring it into all the agenda that is already existing. Right,
okay, just so that we can finish, for now at least, communication, communicate effectively and correctly to funders. What's just emerging is a really persuasive workshop for people in government. I don't use workshop, I'm using loosely, but awareness building in a very effective way, so that perhaps there every single department starts looking at child sexual abuse as part and parcel of what might or might not be under their ambit right now. The entire issue of the synapse between parent and child, and what that, and it's not a question of decline, but there is a different kind of relationship that's emerging, and what that relationship will be in times to come, and how can we effectively use the way kids want to communicate today, to communicate with them. That's something that's very interesting. We have to make it a sector from an issue and collate, get together, and it's not about so much the research as the kind of to demonstrate the impact that actually happens, which will make organizations like Dasra look at this in a much more fruitful and a constructive way. Any final thoughts, Rishi, before we say goodbye? Sounds dramatic.
Just the same thing, really. Just we need to keep the conversation going, not just inside this circle, but take it out to more and more people.
Yeah, this is not an echo chamber. It should never be an echo chamber. This is for us to gather, chat, and then go out there and spread the word. Good luck. Enjoy the next 2 days.